Alright guys, it is time to see how many books I read off of my crazy June TBR. I put 30 books on my TBR for June and I just said, you know, I'm gonna mood read through these, maybe pick outside of the TBR a little bit, and we did. We definitely picked outside of the TBR a little bit, but I did stick to it pretty decently. So, the final verdict for how many I ended up reading that was on that TBR is 12. I read 12 books off of that TBR. I think I read like close to 15 books total though. So let's just get into all of them. I just decided to pick from my spinning TBR cart today instead of stacking them out and stuff. I just, you know, felt like mixing it up a little. So we're gonna start with the one that's on the top, and this was actually my last finish for the month, and that is House of Bean and Blood. This is a reread, and now that I've seen Peaky Blinders, this hit so much harder. Still a 5-star read, absolutely loved it, but like now that I kind of know the vibe that she kept comparing this to, I could picture it so much more vividly, and that just made it even better. This is in a world where there are normal humans and then there are remnants, and those are people that are descended from different gods and given different powers. They live in sort of this post-industrial city like Peaky Blinders, and they are divided by this river. The remnants live on one side, normal people live on the other. They don't really get along, and this follows Milla and Nico. Nico is a remnant, Milla is not. Her family owns the train in this city, and her family's kind of struggling. They're worried about going bankrupt. She ends up agreeing to marry Nico in order to save her family, and Nico needs her to help start using her influence to investigate remnants that are disappearing on the Row, which is what they call his side of the river. The vibe between these two is off the charts, like the tension and yearning for each other. He has a metal hand that he can control with his remnant, which is quite something. It's very fun. And the mystery that they are trying to solve in here is also fantastic. I really just don't get why this book isn't more popular. Like, she was picked up to be published. This is the indie cover, and I still don't see it as much as I would have expected. Like, this is fantastic. If you love any of those vibes that I just mentioned, you're gonna eat this up. Like, awesome book. Really love it. So that was a 5-star read, and then we'll just jump into the rest of my spinning cart. This one I read earlier in the month. Sorry, my neighbors definitely just decided to start mowing the yard, so I apologize for that. This is the third book in the Magnolia Park series. I kind of put this off because I wasn't a huge fan of Daisy Hates when I read that one, and I was really happy to see that this doesn't have the things that I disliked about Daisy Hates. It doesn't have like the hundreds of footnotes at the bottom of the book. It's just the book again, and just Jessa Hastings' like sort of stream of consciousness writing style, and I appreciated that. Now, I can't talk too much about this plot because it's definitely going to give things away for the other books, but I will say this was better than I anticipated because I was worried that we weren't going to see any character development in these people. Are they all still a little bit insufferable, and do I not really like most of them because of the way that they act? Yes, they are all spoiled, they are all entitled, they are all toxic and dramatic in ways that you're like, could you please just knock this off? Like, this would be so easy to fix. But for some odd reason, you get sucked into the story still, and it's so hard to explain until you read it. And I know some people are never going to appreciate this story because of the toxicity of it. Some people are. I am one of the people that are, but like, I needed some redemption going on, some growth happening, and I felt like we finally got that in this book, so I appreciated that. That was a solid, a 3.5-star read, probably. I would put that one at maybe a 4. Definitely enjoy Magnolia's storyline more than I am enjoying Daisy Hates. Then I started the DC Stars series. This is Face Off, which is the first book in the series, and obviously this is a hockey romance. I know it's a little bit weird to read hockey romance in the summer, but I saw the Off Campus series come out like everybody else. I haven't watched it, but like piqued my interest in getting back into some hockey romances, and this one follows a professional hockey team, so these are adults, unlike a lot of hockey series that are following college students, and I appreciated that. The other fun difference in this is that the female character is herself a hockey player, and I really liked that vibe, and she is now on this team with a captain who, like, they don't really get along when they first meet each other. There's not a great little meet cute going on, and they have tension with each other as she is now trying to find her place on the team and prove herself as a female hockey player, and I just really enjoyed the storyline in here. I really enjoyed the romance going on. I did really appreciate this story. It was cute, it was fun, it was fast, it was flirty, it was a 4-star read, so I really liked it. Then I read The Ghostwriter by Julie Clark. This is obviously a thriller. And this is about a young woman who is a ghostwriter for people's memoirs, biographies, stuff like that. And she gets this contract after struggling to get any new work. And it's for sort of more of a fiction book than a nonfiction book, which isn't normally her thing, but she really, really needs the work. So she agrees to it, and then she finds out that it is actually for her father's last book. Now, her father and her have been estranged. They don't really get along because he wasn't a great father, but there was also a lot of rumors going around that he was responsible for 2 deaths in his house when he was younger. And nobody was able to actually prove it, but everybody still believes that he was responsible, and there just wasn't enough proof. So he's actually decided to write sort of his version of events for what had happened that fateful night when he was young. And she is trying to work through all of these confusing feelings that she has towards her father. I just thought this was really well done. You get different clips of memories through like his journal entries and through different video formats, and I like going back and forth in time with things like that sort of give you all of those new pieces of information. And I also enjoyed the familial relationships and tension and angst going on as well. I thought that was really a good addition to this story. So this was a solid 4-star read. Really enjoyed this one, and really actually don't think if I remember right, I wasn't able to guess the ending of this, like bits and pieces of it, but not like the entire thing, so I like that too. Then I read Lights Out. This is the beginning to like a trilogy, I believe. This is a dark romance, and I had been really excited to read this because a lot of people that said that they loved Butcher and Blackbird really loved this series as well because it's like a comedic dark romance. I unfortunately didn't love it as much as everybody else did. This was like a 2.5-star read. I just couldn't get behind the main character and his sort of personality that he had going on. It was eventually explained why he acted the way that he did as a grown adult, that I thought should have worked through some of these issues that was going on, but I still, like, it just wasn't quite enough. And I also was really bored in the beginning of this. To put some perspective on what the plot is, it's following a trauma nurse who, when she goes home, one of her ways that she unwinds is she watches this TikToker that puts out thirst trap videos. And he's wearing a mask, and sometimes there's knife play involved, different things like that, and they're just, I don't know, thirst traps. I don't know how to describe these videos. And she's a huge fan. She leaves him a bunch of comments saying that, like, she'd be okay if he stalked her, and if he showed up in her room one night, like all of these different things. And through a series of events, he learns who she is and starts doing just that. And the beginning of the book really is just those stalking moments happening, and then her at the hospital. You don't get a lot of different settings and plot going on until the second half of the book, and it was so jarring when new plot was introduced because it was almost like the author finally remembered books are supposed to have plot, and it just didn't mesh as well as I wanted it to. It pulled it through a little bit more than what I thought it was going to. I thought this was going to be more like a 1-star read, so it at least brought it up to a 2.5-star read, but I very solidly decided I'm not going to end up reading the rest of this series, especially after seeing people who enjoyed this still rated the next 2 books very low and said that the series really fell off. So, like, if I didn't enjoy this one, I don't think I'm going to enjoy the other 2 books if other people don't think that they're that great. Then I read one that was a very anticipated book for me, and that was Furybound. Everybody had been talking about this last year when it first came out, making the comparison between Fourth Wing and this, but with dire wolves. And now the new book is out, Furybound, and I was like, I really need to get to this series. And this is very similar to Fourth Wing. It is following a woman who is going through these trials to bond with dire wolves, and you get like the training elements of it. You get a slightly different backstory. In this one, she's trying to join this army with the dire wolves because her sister has been kidnapped, and she thinks that her sister is on the other side of the war, that these vampires that they're fighting have kidnapped her, and she needs to get to the front lines to find her. So that's her main goal for joining the army and trying to bond with these dire wolves. I did feel very invested in the story, but I also felt like a lot of the plot elements were very reminiscent of other romantasy books that are out right now. I was able to guess pretty much all of them, and I don't think that's just because I'm good at guessing things. It's just they were you could tell reading through it, if you are familiar with romantasy books, where the plot points were going. Did I mind? No, this was still a 4-star read. I still think that it was well done. I loved the world that was created. I loved the characters that were in here. And I think that there was enough to differentiate it from other romantasy books that I was okay with guessing some of these plot points. But I'm hoping the second book that I'm not able to do that as well. I will say, if you are not into reading really graphic fighting scenes, this does have some pretty graphic training scenes in here where they're learning to bond with these dire wolves and work with them and work as a team unit, as a fighting unit. And yeah, that kind of surprised me how graphic some of them were. So just that little bit of a warning. On to the second cubby, I read another thriller called Everyone Here Is Lying. This one is set in a small town where a young girl goes missing after she has this argument with her father, and all of these secrets start coming out around the town about her family, some other families, and they're trying to investigate where this little girl went, if somebody took her, if she left on her own, like what the deal was. And I was invested for the beginning part of the story. I felt like the pacing was well done and it was like a really quick moving story, but eventually I think I got to like the halfway point and I went, I don't think I like this anymore. The fast pace part of it was because we jumped from one POV to the next very, very quickly, and by the time we got to halfway point, I'm like, I don't feel emotionally connected to any of these characters, invested in any of their stories. Some of them I just didn't care that we were getting their POV. I didn't see the point anymore. And when we got to the ultimate reveal of what had happened, I just felt like because you didn't get connected to anybody, it just really didn't hit all that hard, and I had wanted it to. It was very lackluster, and there were also different things in here that I felt like just didn't wrap up. We just had a lot of loose strings that you never got a conclusion on, and I was, yeah, just very, very disappointed. So this was only another 2.5-star read, which was disappointing because I wanted really, really good books for my birthday month, and some of them didn't quite get there, but that's okay. Then we read Metal Slinger. This was another highly anticipated book that everybody had been talking about last year, and this was a 4.5-star read for me. I really loved this storyline. Everybody always raves about the cliffhanger or like the twist at the end and how they just didn't see it coming, and I was one of those people that was shocked by it, but it was one that I was thinking of at the beginning of the book going, is this what's happening right now? And then I kind of forgot that that was where I was going with it. I was like, no, I must be nuts. Like, that must not be what's going on. And then when we got to the end, I was like, okay, I was almost there. I was almost where this ended up going. So if you end up not really seeing the hints that lead to it and you get to the end and then you're like, this doesn't make sense, if you do a reread, I guarantee you're going to see the things that point to the twist at the ending. They're just very subtle and very well done, and I appreciated that. As a little bit of an explanation for this story, this follows a young girl named Bryn who has spent her life among the Alaha, which is a people group that has kind of been exiled, and they live in this floating community in the middle of the ocean that's kind of made out of like massive trees. So it's like a treehouse, treetop community, and every, I think it said 1 year, every year? I forget how often. I think one time a year they get to go to the mainland, and when she goes, this terrible incident occurs that now is causing issues between the Alaha people and all the other people, and their treaty is at risk of just kind of imploding on each other. And I think that's kind of where we're going to leave it as far as the plot goes. It's a really fast-paced moving story. The only reason it wasn't 5 stars is because I just wanted a little bit more description of some of the different things as far as their magic and their powers go, because it's such an interesting magic system and an interesting development for their powers, and I just wanted a little bit more. And a little bit more about this treetop community that's in the middle of the ocean. Like, come on, that's really cool, and I needed more. But so that was the only reason it wasn't a 5 star, but I did still really enjoy this, and I can't wait to get to the second one. After that, I read Warrior Fae. This is the 5th and final book in the Ruthless Boys of the Zodiac Academy series, which is like a prequel series to the regular Zodiac Academy. I did not enjoy this that much. It was just another 2.5 star read that felt like it dragged on too much. This is a very heavy Why Choose series, very spice heavy, and it just felt like by this point in the series we were getting way more spice than we were plot, and I just was very disappointed by that. I enjoyed the plot originally at the beginning of the series, and then we just fell into a ton of spice. And, you know, I don't mind that. I read dark romance. I like books with some spice, but I also like plot, and this really just didn't have that. I know some girlies love this. They vibe with this series a lot. It is a very vibes heavy series, and that's fantastic. It just wasn't quite for me. So that was a little disappointing as well. Then I read another sports romance, and that is Caught Up. This is the third book in the Windy City series. This follows Kai Rhodes, Isaiah Rhodes, Kai Rhodes. I always mix the brothers up, who is a Major League Baseball player, and he is in serious need of a nanny. He is living the single dad life while trying to be a professional athlete, and it's just really difficult. And he can't seem to keep a nanny because he is very protective of his son, which makes sense. Totally fair. His coach actually comes up with, or team manager, his coach comes up with a solution. He's like, hey, my daughter is going to come around with us for the summer and go to all of our games, all of the cities and stuff. She can be your nanny. And he doesn't really give her a choice. He's like, she's your nanny and you're just gonna have to deal with this. And her name is Miller, and she is a sassy spitfire of a person. She is a professional, like, pastry chef, has won a bunch of awards, but she's kind of like losing her edge a little bit. She's losing her motivation, her inspiration, and she's just needs to find herself. So she agrees to take the summer off to do this, and you get to see their romance blossom. And it's definitely very fiery time between the two of them as they learn that they actually have feelings for each other because their personalities are kind of different, and she rubs him the wrong way, and he's so protective of his son. And it's really cute. It was a 4-star read. I did feel like the romance a little bit insta-love, but you eventually get some of that development of their relationship between the two of them. So I did still enjoy it. It just wasn't my favorite of the series yet, but still highly recommend. Then I read the second book in the Lady of Darkness series, which is Lady of Shadows, and really enjoyed this. This is probably going to be a top tier series as if the rest of the books continue this way. This was a 5-star read for me. I just really loved the character development that we got in here. There's a lot of mental health representation surrounding the main female character and her learning who she is, about her past, learning to work through some of the different struggles that she has in relation to her past and everything. And I just thought it was really well done. For a little bit of context, this series follows a young woman who has been working as an assassin and doesn't really have a lot of answers for what had happened in her past with her mom, and she started working as an assassin kind of to just have a home again, have a life, and to try to find these answers, but people kept putting her in different cages, in different boxes, and she tries to remove herself from that life, but she's given the opportunity to go after one more target, and then sort of her boss or whatever says, I can give you the answers that you've been looking for. So she agrees to one more job, and while doing that, she finds herself in the company of a couple different people that maybe she doesn't get along with really well, and starts to learn more about her past. I know that's a very vague description, but I'm trying not to give things away, talking about this book and then the first book, and yeah, the found family in here is great. Lots of, like I said, mental health representation that I really appreciated. So I'm very excited to continue this series as well. I had a lot of series that I'm really looking forward to continuing. Then, speaking of series, I read A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. I just really wanted to reread this. Everybody knows what this series is. I won't belabor this one too much, but this was another 5-star read. Yes, it's YA, but I still just think this is such a good mystery series and strongly recommend this, and definitely going to continue my reread through the series. Then we have another hockey romance book, and this is The Mistake. This is the second book in the Off-Campus series. I do think that I actually enjoy the DC Stars series a little bit more. I know I've only read one of those, but I felt like this book and the first book were just really, really spice heavy and not as much plot going on. I also just struggle a little bit more to connect with the whole college party atmosphere going on in the books at this stage in my life. Even when I was in college, that was never really the setting that I put myself in while I was at college, so I don't have that to relate back to. But I did still enjoy this for what it was. It was still a fun read. It was like a 3-star read. This follows John Logan, who can get any girl that he wants, and that's pretty much what he does. He hooks up left, right, and center. And then it also follows, I forgot her name, Grace, who is a virgin and doesn't really want to be anymore, but she's kind of scared to put herself out there. She tries to put herself out there with John Logan in the beginning of the book. Doesn't really go well. He spends the rest of the book kind of trying to make up for that and grovel and convince her that he's not a bad guy. And I did enjoy that aspect of it. I do enjoy a man who grovels and who does it well. So I like that part. It's just there are a lot of spicy scenes in here, and I just wanted more than that. I wanted a little bit more development in the characters and the plot and everything. So that's why it was only a 3-star read. Then I read She's Not Sorry by Mary Kubica. This is another thriller book, and I'd heard a lot of good things about her writing, so that's why I picked this one up, forgetting that I have another one of her books on my TBR. And this is following another trauma nurse, actually. She works at a hospital. One of the patients that she has is a woman who potentially tried to harm herself, throwing herself off a bridge, but then they're not really sure if she was pushed. And the trauma nurse ends up getting a little bit too invested in this woman's life and concerning herself with how this entire thing happened. And you're not entirely sure why. You eventually figure it out, but you have that mystery going on. And then there's another one where she keeps bringing up like women getting assaulted in the city and that whole concern. So you got two kind of different plots going on, and at the end of the day it just felt like they didn't really mix very well, and the one felt really underdeveloped because of it. And I don't know, there was something about this that didn't jive very well with me at all. I think I gave this 2 stars, 2.5 stars. I was just very underwhelmed as I read through this and as we got to the final conclusion of what was going on with this series, or with this story, sorry. I just, yeah, was not as impressed as I thought I was going to be, but oh well. We have 2 more books that I read physically, and these 2 did impress me, so these were nice. These were actually at the end of the month, so I did end the month on a pretty strong note, which I appreciated. I read This Monster of Mine, which, oh my gosh, severely underrated. Don't know why more people aren't talking about this. This is inspired by ancient Rome and their political and justice system, and it follows a young woman who had survived this very harrowing ordeal where somebody tried to kill her, and it's years in the future, and she is now going back to the city where this had happened at, and her main goal is to work as, I'm going to call it an assistant because I can't pronounce the fantasy word that they're using in here, an assistant to a tetrarch, which is pretty much a judge. There are 4 of them in the city, and they pretty much are responsible for their own little area of the city and hearing complaints and criminal cases and meting out punishment. Now, the fantasy twist in this is that people have certain powers. The tetrarchs can sometimes control different elements like lightning and different stuff like that, and the assistants have this gift where they can sort of read people's intent. They can tell if people are lying or if they're telling the truth. They can probe into their mind to like sift through memories and stuff, and then they can also sort of portray the memories and make them come to life for the people watching. And in this world, there's a very harsh justice system, like eye for an eye, you lose a hand if you steal something, things like that. They're not afraid to torture people, so it's very, very dark in this world. The main female character, whose name I forget because I always forget main female characters' names, Sarai, she goes to the city as this assistant and is paired with a tetrarch, and she starts to think that potentially he's actually the person that tried to kill her. The problem is that her memories of that night are very broken and disjointed, and she just isn't positive. So she has that going on where she thinks that she's working for the man that killed her, but she also can't deny that she has an attraction towards him. So you have all of that tension going on between the 2 of them, and he himself just exudes all of this like sexual tension, and reading their story together is just, it was fantastic. I loved the romance in here, but I also just loved her fighting to find out what had happened to her years ago, how it connects to other things that are going on in the city, and her sort of taking out her rage on people that deserve it. So very feminine rage coded, very much like supporting women's wrongs, and I do enjoy a book that has that element to it. Kind of genre bendy because you get the fantasy, you get some of the romance elements, but you also get sort of the whodunit aspect of like a mystery thriller, and yeah, fantastic book, 5-star read. You really, really need to read this, but there are some disturbing scenes, especially the opening one. I was very shocked by that, but still, a 5-star read. Loved that book so much. And then another 5-star read is The Poet Empress. I read this in my Finding a 5-Star vlog, and this one, wow, this one's beautiful. This is an Asian-inspired fantasy story, and it follows a young girl named Win, who is living in a very impoverished small like farming town, and people there are dying, they're starving, there's just no food, and she agrees to become a concubine for the prince because she thinks that that's going to give her the chance to bring food back to her town and help influence the way that sort of this world is run. And the problem is she is up against hundreds of other women that are vying to become one of like the 30 concubines, and then even if she gets chosen, she has to vie for the prince's attention amongst the concubines that are chosen, because there's like 30 of them that get picked. So not only does she has like kind of a dangerous element with that because everybody's kind of like fighting against each other, the prince himself is also an extremely dangerous man who has been known to torture people, kill people, just because, like on a whim, and she has no idea why. Eventually she decides that the best thing that she can do, aside from becoming a concubine, is actually figure out a way to kill the prince, who seems to have this magical protection. Nobody has been able to successfully assassinate him, and she's told about this poem that would be able to successfully kill him, because in this world there's something called poetry magic, which is beautiful. So they can write, sometimes it's small little poems out called blessings, and the gods go through these blessings and something can happen from them. But then there are longer poems that they can write out for like grander magic. And there's a love poem that she could write that would unalive her husband. The problem is she has to write this poem with love, which is very difficult to do when you hate the man that you are serving and that you are trying to kill. So this story is following her learning about her husband, learning about his past, and trying to figure out a way to successfully write this poem. This is so like jam-packed with just beautiful imagery. The world that is created in here is vibrant and stunning, and the cultural inspiration and the beautiful traditions is so, like I said, beautiful to read about. And then you get all of the sadness that's going on with the prince and why he is the way he is towards people, and Wynne feels so conflicted towards him once she starts learning more about him, and as a reader you start feeling conflicted about his story as well, and that was beautiful. The way that this ruling family functions within each other, where nobody actually works together, they're all fighting with each other, very heavy on like familial relationships and those tensions between each other. By the end of this, I cried on like the second to last page, because she had written such a beautiful story, and the way that it wrapped up, it just really hits so hard. And it was just, it's stunning. You have to read it to kind of get the complexity of the different things going on in here, but I think that she did a fantastic job of capturing that struggle of hating this prince and loving this prince, and what do you do with it, and understanding him and the world, and trying to keep Wynne true to herself. It was beautiful. It was beautiful, which is why I'm rambling about it. So this was another 5-star read. Really loved that. Then I did have 1 or 2 books that I read through like an audiobook, so let me find those really quick because I never remember them. Alright, so there's actually 2. One was an audiobook, and that was Evermore. This is the technically like 3rd book in the Never Sky trilogy. The first book is slightly separate, but like influences what happens with the next 2, which are like a connected duology. I struggle to explain the plot of this because it so heavily connects to the first book, but explaining the plot to the first book doesn't really explain this new one, because you learn all of the stuff from this new one at the end of that one. So I can't really explain it very well. I'll just explain that this was only a 3-star read because I felt confused reading through this. The book felt very long, and like it had too much extraneous details going on, lots of different moving pieces that I just struggled to connect. There's also a plot device in here that I get confused with every time it's in a story, and that is probably just a me problem at this point. So yeah, oops. But I do love Marina Lynn's writing. I love her writing style. I love the worlds that she creates. They're very unique and creative, and it's probably, like I said, my fault that I get confused with the plot within it. There's also a very heavy sense of found family in here, which I love as well. So still a 3-star read. Like I said, I think it's my problem that I just get confused while reading through her books. And then the last one is going to be The Sword of Kaigen. I read this on my Kindle. I was really hoping to love this, but I struggled with this a lot. It's a very drawn out story, and I think that was part of the problem. It's set on this mountaintop following a small community that is very heavily rooted in older traditional ways of living. It's another Asian-inspired story, and they are very into the old ways of like swordsmanship and fighting, and the people in the community, the kids, go to this school that they have to hike up the mountainside to go to, where they learn these old traditional ways, but then the rest of the world around them is more modern with airplanes and technology and the internet, and which is a very confusing juxtaposition. And I thought that was going to be some of the plot going on, of like really contrasting this and diving into this old traditional way and showing the benefits of that versus modern civilization. But that's not really what ended up happening. You get a lot of focus on just this one family, the mother and her young son, and the dynamic going on in the family in a modern culture where women aren't as elevated as men as far as power and influence go in their family, in their community. And she doesn't have a great relationship with her husband because it was an arranged marriage. You find out a lot about her past. There's a little bit of like a war conflict going on that you get. There was a lot of different moving pieces that felt very drawn out and very long. I didn't really enjoy the way that the story went as far as like some of the redemption for a character in there. I didn't feel like he deserved it, or that it really was a gratifying thing for me. I think there's a lot to be said in here about family and old traditional styles and when you can let go of those, when you need to learn to move past them. Things just felt too dragged out for me that I kind of got bored as I was reading through it. So I know other people think this is a beautiful story, and I can kind of see why. It's just maybe, again, a me problem that I got bored reading through it. So that was only a 2-star read, unfortunately, because I know a lot of people really love that one. So ending on a low note, but there were a lot of really great reads this month. So overall, a really good June month, and I got through a decent amount of the TBR that I set for myself. Maybe it wasn't quite half, but still, I mean, I picked from it, so it wasn't too bad. So that is all I have for this video. Thank you so much if you've made it this far, and I hope to see you in another one very soon. Bye.